Elliott Pollack, CEO of Elliott D. Pollack and Company. So when I was talking to people this morning, somebody said it wouldn't be an economic event in Arizona if Elliott wasn't here. So he is truly one of the anchors of economic analysis here in the state, and we're very happy to have him here. Has degrees from Boston University and USC.
I've got too many slides, but I'm going to go through them quickly. Okay, so I think that Dennis can count on at least one more year of sluggish growth. In fact, I think several more years of sluggish growth. All right, so if you like 15, you like 16. All right, there's no question about that. There are some now, by the way, we're past the point where the economy is going to be all good news. So if you were upset the last few years, that was the good news period in the economy. Now we've got some imbalances. And again, recessions essentially occur to correct imbalances. Well, now you've got some starting, and I don't think any of them are going to cause a recession, but they're worth keeping your eye on. Obviously, the inventory sales ratio is out of line, strong dollar, international with China. Financing at home still a problem. The stock market goes up and down, but especially China-centric companies are at risk. All right, so this is where we stand in the recovery. It's starting to get a little old, starting to get bent over, and but we still got a way to go. And by the election time next year, the economy should be reasonably strong. Now, let's go through the good news, all right? First, there's no irrational exuberance. Second, debt burden still very low, okay? I think Alliance had this is, if you went into one of their offices, you'd get a free watermelon. A financial obligations ratio is as low as it was in the early 80s. So people have gotten their financial house in order, and actually they're starting to borrow again, which is a little early, but I'm kind of surprised. And they're borrowing basically for two things: automobiles and student loans, okay, which is simply a massive transfer of wealth from the government to universities. Can't last forever. Consumer confidence is back to normal. Net worth is improving. Hillary is on a corner wanting 200 grand for a speech. Never mind. And real income growth is up. I'll let you read this for a second. And it's up. That's pretty good. Liquidity is improving, and inflation is low. Oil prices are very low, and that really is spurred a lot. In 2005, we actually imported 60% of what we consumed. In 2013, it was 35%. It's down to 21%. At least it's going in the right direction. And that basically, if you compare it to 2005, saves basically $420 million a day. And from 2013, that comparison is $125 million a day we're saving because oil is cheaper. That means about $750 a year for the average person. There are no capacity issues. There's no drag. The government's not a drag on the economy at this point. And the Fed is still expansive, and even if they raise rates, they're going to raise them so little that it's going to continue to be expansive. The last thing they can afford to do is push the economy into recession. All right, prices are up on houses. It's now taking some incentives to get houses sold, but it won't for long. The stock market, people were panicked about this, but again, the stock market goes up and down and doesn't really, it's the tail wagging the dog. It's not that important. All right, so what's not so good? Let's talk about excess inventory. The inventory sales ratio is too high. But if you take a look at where it's high, it's basically autos. And this would concern me except for one thing, and the average age of the auto fleet's 11.4 years. Before this all started, it was 9.5 years. So despite all the purchases of autos, cars are getting older. And so I'm not concerned. The dollar's strengthening, and obviously it's gone up. And this is the old story about the U.S. is the prettiest house on an ugly block, is the way I'd put it. And when there's any risk in the world, people go to the dollar because there is no alternative. Nor do I expect an alternative for the foreseeable future, like for the lifetime of anybody in this room. So what happens? American goods are more expensive overseas. Foreign goods are cheap. helps keep domestic inflation low, keeps interest rates low longer, but we're sending jobs overseas because it's cheaper to produce them over there. On the other hand, it's a good time to buy foreign goods, and it's a good time for international tourism, as opposed to this guy who came here. Okay, exports to China is a big nothing. It's like 0.7% of GDP. It could slow things for a while, but it's not going to cause a major problem. Now, Trump has some big ideas for construction if he's elected president. This is what he plans on doing to the White House. So continued subpar growth, and the recovery should continue for some time longer. I don't see the risk of recession in the near term, but I just don't see anything that's going to spur the economy into growing rapidly. So what's different? I have a different take than Ron, and if you actually, you'd have to have about $30 or $40 million in income to, if you adjusted the inflation brackets to get to that 90% rate that was prevalent in the Eisenhower administration. All right, there's no accelerated income. What do I know? What I mean by that? Well, in the 70s and 80s, that's when women entered the labor force en masse. So there was a huge huge increase in two-income households. Obviously, they went out and bought goodies. There was an increase in the stock market in the 90s it quadrupled. That was the wealth effect. And then it was not only housing prices between 96 and 2005, but it was the ability to use your house as an ATM machine that essentially allowed people to live on far more than their income. All that's over. People actually have to live within their means, and that's shocking to say, but that's what's going on. And then there's the demographics, and people reach their peak spending years when they're 45 to 54. This is live births. You lag at 46 years, and what you see is there's going to be a lot fewer people who are entering their peak spending years until 2023. If there are fewer people in their peak spending years, there's probably going to be less spent. So aggregate demand is going to be a little off. Also, when I got married, the average male got married at about 23, the average female at about 20. It's approaching 30 at this point. And just take a look at these statistics. In 1960, 65% of people 18 to 32 were married. It's down to 26%. So if you delay marriage, you delay children, you delay housing, you delay all that junk you buy for your garage. And so, but it'll happen. So again, slower intermediate term growth as well, as far as I could see. All right, and so this is kind of what it feels like. That's what Ron is describing. All right, now let's talk about Arizona. Anderson Cooper, I know, was out here after the earthquake because it was such a big news story, but I know this is some of the damage done by the earthquake. Wolf Blitzer was all over that. Okay, we've really had a significant recovery, but it's when you compare to what the recoveries normally are in Arizona that we look so bad. In 2006, we were second. We went to 49th. In 13, we were 10th. 14, we were 16th. So far, we're 13th. And in terms of job growth, not bad, but relative to what we're used to, it's terrible. And you can see all those years we were number 1 or 2, and so since this recovery started, it's been pretty weak. Same thing is true with Phoenix, which was one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the country for years. It's down to 14th out of 32 major metropolitan areas, and it's not bad, it's not great. So what's different? Here's what's different. People aren't showing up. And we'll talk about why they're not showing up. And because they're not showing up, they're not buying houses. There's a subnormal national recovery. And then there's local factors spelt 1070. So what's changed? Okay, people aren't moving here. And when people move here, what happens is not only do they come here usually chasing jobs, but they come here and they bring their own level of demand for goods and services. So there's a ripple effect. And that ripple effect can be quite significant. And as a result, you're not only those people not showing up, but the ripple effect isn't there. Okay, fewer people means fewer houses, less commercial construction. We'll get over it. I was embarrassed by this one, but it's the only one I could find. All right, so, and there are fewer migrants chasing jobs, and here's why. Normally, what happens is Arizona has an incredibly low unemployment rate, so it sucks people in from the outside to fill jobs, creating more jobs. Well, this time around, the last two cycles were at 4.6 and 4.1. Greater Phoenix was at 3.2 and 4.0 in terms of unemployment, essentially full employment, sucking people in from the outside. And you can see from this, both Arizona and Greater Phoenix, the unemployment rate is still relatively high for this point in the cycle. And as a result, you're not getting those people in. We're also creating fewer jobs, and so there's fewer need for those people to come, less need for those people to come here, and considerably fewer people are coming. That's the major difference. But we now know what Arizona is going to look like when population does stop growing. All right, I'm going to skip some of these because I want to get to something I actually consider important. All right, construction labor. All right. There is virtually no builder I know that isn't complaining about skilled trades. And the question is, are they going to start moving back from south of the border to here? And the answer is probably not, because the number of people crossing the border is down dramatically. So I don't think we're going to get nearly as many. Obviously, then, what about Houston and North Dakota? Are they going to come down from here? Well, they haven't so far en masse. This is going to be a problem for a while, and it's going to result in higher labor costs, because that's really what's going to get labor down here. This is Arizona's population of foreign-born non-citizens, and you can see that it's fallen off dramatically, and it isn't picking up. And here's what builders are saying about what skills they're having trouble filling. Virtually everything you can think of, it's a problem. All right, here's the major issue. Distribution of movers. This is people who move from a different state, from a different county in a state, and internationally. And if you go through the numbers, and we went from 2nd to 19th to 6th. But here's the story. For the U.S. as a whole, 26% fewer people are moving. That's a lot. In addition, our capture rate is down about 12%. You add those two up, that's, basically 40%. And so there's 40% less people moving here. This implies 10,400 fewer single-family homes in Greater Phoenix and about 56 fewer apartment units in Greater Phoenix a year, by the way, a year. That's a lot. And so, again, construction employment suffered, but the overall economy suffered. Until that picks up, Phoenix and Arizona will not grow rapidly. It'll grow kind of in a mediocre conclusion. I don't know if any of you like The Princess Bride. This is one of my favorite quotes from The Princess Bride. He's not dead, he's only mostly dead. Well, that's the way I describe Arizona in the moment. He's mostly dead, but it'll recover. Why do people move here? Employment opportunities, fewer of those. Affordable housing, yes. Moderate cost of living, yes. Family and friends, yes. Weather, yes. Lifestyle, yes. Everything is the same, except we have fewer employment opportunities. When that changes, because people start to move here again, we'll be back in business. Population growth, I'm going to go through this really quickly because I think I'm over my time. Basically, it's recovered, but again, it used to be 3 to 4%. Now it's a little over 1%. APS, this goes back to 1954. You can see where we stack up. Yeah, we've recovered, but we're still way below normal in terms of growth, and that's an issue. Domestically, we're third, interestingly enough, which is great. Internationally, however, we're 17th, down from 7th or 8th before Prop 1070, and that's a big deal. I'm going to skip this. So Arizona, it's not broken. It's mainly a reaction to this fewer people moving. And so this is what you can do about it. I thought I'd throw that. So how quickly is this going to recover? Slowly, okay? And even the most optimistic, the Department of Administration, saying 2.2%. If we got back to 2.2%, every home builder in the world would be doing flips, but it would take you 18 months to get a house because they don't have enough construction workers to build those houses. So what else? Okay, housing recovery. I thought I'd get a kick out of this. Basically, all the parade of horribles, negative equity, that's being resolved. The FHA loan limit, that's a big deal because it cut out about, the FHA loan limit's a big deal because the FICO score needed to get an FHA loan was 681. To get a Fannie or Freddie loan is 744. That cuts out something like 25% of the market. That's a big deal. Foreclosures, that's not a problem. Short sales, those people are going to be qualified. Millennials, let me skip to millennials. I thought you'd get a kick out of this. Surprisingly, the number of 25 to 34-year-olds living with mommy and daddy has not declined. It's actually increased, and that's a big deal. And there's about 1.5 million people living with mommy and daddy, and then let's talk about student loans. This is what has delayed saving for a down payment for a home. The number one thing for people 34 and younger is student loan debt. And it's tripled, more than tripled in the last 10 years, and it's a problem. And the problem is that if you're paying your student loan debt, you're not buying houses or furniture or beer. So unless you have a major that's going to get you enough incremental income to pay for that student loan, you got a problem. No offense, but if you're a Russian literature major, you're going to be the most well-educated sales clerk at Macy's, and you're never going to pay your student loan debt. So that's a problem. I'm not going to go through this. Housing's going to recover. It's likely to continue, and I'm just going to skip to the conclusion because I'm going to be pulled off pretty soon. I couldn't pass on this. I like this one, but I like this one even better. I couldn't decide which one to put up, so I probably should. The conclusion is, okay, the economy is going to continue to grow. No boom in Arizona until population increases and housing makes a meaningful recovery. 16 will be a little better than 15, but that's about it. So if you like last year, you like this year. Thanks a lot.